Welcome back to yet another tutorial. So in last week's tutorial, we implemented basic collision between players, projectiles, and monsters. Although the collision detection was a bit broken, to say the least. So in today's tutorial, we are going to fix our mistakes from last tutorial so that we can have a working collision detection system that doesn't kill the player every time it fires to the right when looking left. To get things started with, we are in the projectiles.hx file. So we just want to add a new class variable called private var spawner of type HaxeFlixel object. So what this variable will do, let me just import it. So what this variable will do is it'll keep track of who spawned the projectile. That way we can, when we test for collisions, we can make sure that the collision detection only happens between the person that spawned the projectile and, well, not the, so that collision only happens between the projectile and the one that didn't spawn it. That's better. Okay. So in the constructor, we also want the spawner. So this will have to be set every time we create a new instance, or a new instance of the projectile, but it should at least allow us a workaround for the previous issue we had. Oh, and then under, so here we just say spawner equals spawner. Awesome. So the last thing we need is just a public facing getter for the whoever spawned the projectile. So get spawner text object, and we return spawner. Awesomeness. So that's as far as we need to go with the projectile class. So back in our playstate class, we want to go down to where we spawned the projectiles, because we'll now see two issues. So new projectile, it requires the spawner, and this is for when the player's created, so we can insert player, and then when we create a projectile whenever the monster spawns it. So here we can just call what was the variable? Projection monster type get position. Cool. So that handles checking who, stating who spawned the projectile. Next, we want to go down to our functions that handles collision detection. So over in player projectile detection, collision, we want to say if projectile dot get spawner does not equal player, just delete that. We check for collisions between the projectile and the player, and if the projectile was not fired by the player, we want to teleport the player to a random position on the map, and the projectile should then be destroyed. Next, after that, is monster collision. Now here there isn't really an issue because the player can't run into himself. We don't check for we don't check for melee collision from the player, just against the player. So we don't have to add anything here. And next, if we want to check, so if the projectile dot get spawner equals player, we want to, let me delete that, kill the monster and kill the projectile. Now here we can't And let me just underscore this. So here we can't use the monster because that still has the issue where, say for instance, if a ranged monster shoots it, it can still kill the melee monster. It can still kill other ranged monsters. So it's better to, and because there's only one player, we can just say, okay, well, let's see if this projectile was spawned by the player, and if it was, then kill the monster and the projectile. Otherwise, just let it pass. Now, there's just one funny bug I want to show you before we go on. So let me F5. It'll start building in the background. I'll probably make a little cut here in the video until it pops up. So see you in a bit. Okay, so the game is up, and let me just get away. So you might notice as wow. Oh, that's such a funny bug. Like, I didn't notice this whilst playing, but because the ranged units doesn't have any drag, whenever a projectile hits a ranged unit, it ends up increasing the unit's velocity in the opposite direction as to where it was fired. So you just see ranged units flying off the map. In any case, you can also see that if a collision happens between a bullet and a melee unit, that the bullet just kind of bounces off the melee unit and doesn't really do anything to it. But we still can fire projectiles if I manage to actually hit it, and we can still kill the melee units. But if we were to, say for instance, move to the right while shooting left, we don't kill ourselves anymore. So that's awesome, and we end up spawning projectiles which we can then fling, which is so awesome. And this would make for a perfect, like one of those puzzle games where you have to push the boxes. This would be absolutely perfect for that. Imagine if that gives me such a good idea. But in any case, before I get off track, so to get rid of this bug, rather than checking for for collisions, we want to check for overlap. So overlap. We still want to check for collisions with the melee monsters, since we want the melee monsters to push us back, not go on top of us and deal continuous damage. And then overlap. But for everything else, we want an overlap, so it checks whether or not the two objects are overlapping each other. So it doesn't like push them away, it doesn't add any forces to them or physics or anything. It just checks whether they overlap each other, and then from there, wait, ranged monsters. Oh wait, my bad, that should be overlap. This should be like, okay, so as I was saying, it just checks for overlapping, which doesn't impact it, so that the projectiles will still go through the projectiles spawned by monsters will still go through the monsters, and my projectiles will still go through me, so I can still fire past myself without damaging myself. And this is an absolute bullet hell. Thank you. Cool. So that's it for this week's tutorial. Now, before you leave, please consider dropping a like, subscribe, and follow us on Twitter. And if you're a huge programming fan like me, consider checking out 8bitswag.com. It is an awesome developer swag store that myself and I created. We currently sell stickers, shirts, and hoodies, and we are Always like working on it, upgrading it. And as you can see here, we currently have up to 212 different products that we sell, including shirts containing the logo for the store that I myself created, which I'm pretty proud of since it's my first pixel art. But in any case, if you feel like you want to support the channel, or you just want some cool developer swag, come check us out at 8bitswag.com. Thank you and enjoy your day.